Welcome to CGT Square Talk, where top experts in the industry share their groundbreaking journeys. Brought to you by Blue Squared, your strategic digital partner.
Remember now. I thought he was an offensive lineman, actually. Christian, how are you?
Good to see you. I'm good. How are you?
Good. We were just before you came on, we were just talking about football because I had to share the fact that you're a fan and that you used to play. And I think you told me the Chargers were your favorite team. Is that? I can't remember if that's totally true.
So we can still see like a Rams flag back there.
I see Rams, yeah.
See, right? There's my old helmet I used to play with.
I see that.
So, yeah, it's kind of difficult. Rams and Chargers, depending on the mood.
Right.
I know it's a difficult combination.
Right.
But
Exactly.
it is what it is.
So Armen, I don't know if you've met Armen before or not.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, Armen Gasanyan, he's our North American customer success person, and he does the podcast with me.
Perfect.
Thanks for joining us. It's good to see you. So you run Orchestration and Exceptions Management. I think that's still what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm,
so
correct.
Tell me, I mean, one thing that's kind of interesting, I think you talk about the virtual treatment journey. Well, what does that mean in practical terms?
Mm-hmm. In practical terms, it means that we, first of all, divided the value chain, and we call it value chain. You could also say supply chain, into a specific layer that we are managing. So we have a team focusing on the patient journey, for example. They work with the treatment sites and the affiliates, the patient operations team. We have a supply chain team that is focusing on the physical journey, which is mainly about shipment execution, setup of shipments, and they also do some additional work related to managing forecasting and like network decisions. And then my team is focusing on the virtual journey, as we say, which is making sure that everything that is happening in the physical world is also reflected in our core transactional systems. So the ERP system, for example.
Okay.
And just to give a bit more context, at the moment, also this definition is kind of changing. So we are more or less moving together some activities that are done in end-to-end value chain. For example, courier booking, also in the team, to make sure we can cover the full end-to-end value chain more or less with one role, ideally, one person, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like kind of the next step of maturity to make sure we are ready for the upcoming expected scale that we see in the portfolio. So the definition of those levels is still evolving and changing as we grow and mature.
Right. It's really the systems, though, right? That's tracking kind of the, if you want to call it a virtual journey, a real life journey that the patient's going through, and then tracking it in the background through different systems.
Yeah, but also like orchestrating it. So more or less, you could also say we are accountable for the order to cash process and execute the order to cash process for commercial therapies, and we cover similar work in the clinical space, where it's really about more or less making sure we place a purchase order, sales order. We make sure that the courier is booked. That's the future setting where we execute the actual courier activities. We make sure that, more or less then also the virtual flow of funds for the commercial setting via Switzerland is covered, and cover the full process from a transactional perspective. And that's kind of an operational engine that we are building. And then this engine would be serving end-to-end value chain and the product teams with a specific service to run the value chain.
Right.
More or less.
Very interesting. So there's a lot of data, right? That flows right across, right? So data, transactions, documents, and everything else. In your opinion, what ensures that smooth data flow, right? I'm assuming there's a lot of systems that are involved, but between the systems, what ensures that data flow that is throughout the entire patient journey that goes from beginning to end?
Yeah, that's a very complex, an easy question, a complex answer, in other words. So if I would like to separate or dive into a few areas, I think there are definitely still areas where information is flowing through the value chain, and it's mainly like manual work. So, for example, we receive an email notification about I don't know, a certain manufacturing status change. There is a lot of email and like form communication going on. That is like one side, and then the other side is the area where we are using systems that we have in place. There again, I would differentiate clinical versus commercial. In the clinical world, there are front-end systems that the clinical teams and sites are already working with, like IXRS, for example, like a wave system as well. And then in the commercial setting, we started to invest into a treatment center portal that allows us to collaborate with treatment sites to ensure the data capture is done in a system already and system supported, so that we can feed it into the architecture via our interfaces. So those two worlds I would kind of separate, the one where we are still like paper-based and the one where we are system-enabled. And for me, one of the key challenges that we also are still trying to tackle is how to best bridge the time between the first and the second stage. So I think in a very early setting, it's kind of clear that this mainly needs to be manual because the process is not well defined. There are no systems. The partner we're working with might not have a system. And on the other side, for a commercial setting, it's clear that we need to be able to reflect the order to cash process in our commercial transactional system, which is an SAP ERP system. And then that's clear. The starting point, the end point is clear. The question is, how do you fill all that like gray space in between with a solution and are still able to invest in steps and not risk too much from an investment perspective in people and also systems?
You perfectly touched on my next question about the challenges and kind of answers the entire thing, right? So that filling that gap in between, that's where the challenges are most of the time.
Correct. Yeah.
Very nice.
So when you talk about the value chain and especially around exceptions, what do you see are the biggest operational risks in terms of the virtual flow and specifically around different exception types?
Yeah. What are key risks? So again, here I would try to separate the question into a few areas, because in the end, like CGT, it sounds like it's one thing, but as we know, it's not just one thing. There are so many different like types of therapies, modalities. There are different settings from a supply chain perspective. There are different levels of system support that we can leverage. So there is not this one specific situation where you can clearly list the challenges and they apply to all situations. So that's why I think the challenges that I see is one, that we are mainly like in most of the areas, although we have experience, we are expanding our footprint into uncharted territory. So for example, the commercial gene therapy that we are currently rolling out, we have new countries that we are bringing on board. And with every country, we need to more or less assess, are there certain local requirements that we need to cover? Are there certain things we have to consider to change process, system, procedures, and so on? And that in itself is already a risk for business continuity, because if we miss something, we might run into an issue that we're not able to serve the country and the patients in the country as we would like to.
Like a regulatory issue, you mean?
Regulatory issues, correct. Could also be like procedural issues that we have internally, because like I said, it's uncharted territory also because it's not that we don't do business in those countries. I mean, Roche, Genentech is a huge pharma company. So it's very likely that when we go into a country that there is already an established affiliate set up and that we have a model in place to sell our, for example, biologics products, but we don't have a process framework and so on for selling CGT products, where the end-to-end value chain team, so also then my team, is covering activities that are typically covered by the affiliate in those countries, because we really want to establish this end-to-end way of running the value chain. So, and this change in itself, the fact that we are rolling out and covering uncharted territory from that perspective is a big challenge in itself.
It's very interesting what you were talking about, the affiliates. Now, from the affiliate perspective, how quickly are they adapting, right? So they probably got used to doing business in a certain way, and now CGT is coming in, and it's completely different animal, right? And
Right. The legacy
how
problem, right?
yeah, they're already set in their ways from procedures and from regulatory perspective and from from all the compliance and documents and traceabilities. How quickly are they adapting? Are they open to change? Are they usually open to to make these kind of changes? Because so
Sure.
sometimes it happens that
Super open. Sorry.
No, honestly, I mean, yeah, to be bloody honest, at the beginning we had similar like concerns, but really I have to say that the experience so far is very positive. They are supporting us because also they are very busy with our classical portfolio in the biologics space, and everything is targeted towards this space. So I think they're very supportive. They are happy that someone is coming that brings some additional support and expertise, because all the challenges are very new to them as well. So they're eager to engage and exchange and work on solutions. So so far it's going very well, to be honest. So yeah, it's a
How,
strong collaboration.
how much do you look at like what others have done? Because obviously BMS, Novartis, just to name a couple, and Kite, Gilead, they've kind of had to face some of this too because they have global products that they're dealing with.
No, I see the point. I think like Roche, Genentech in the end is a I would say an early follower in the CGT space. And there were some strategic moves that the company made to establish or expand our footprint in the space with Spark, Poseida. I mean, you saw the news.
Yep.
So I think, but still we are a follower, which is sometimes a challenge, but also sometimes an advantage. Because in theory, you can learn from failures that others did and gain like from the experience that others or benefit from the experience others made. Obviously, there are certain like firewalls between companies, so we cannot talk about everything. But where we see an opportunity to learn from others, we try to learn and do it as or leverage the information as best as we can. One thing though is that we started to do from the very beginning is to really look at that information, consider information and experience that is like publicly available, but then try to really define what does it mean for us. So there were specific situations where we know other companies were headed in one direction, and we made a decision that we don't want to go into that direction for specific reasons. So we're not just copy pasting. We are always putting what we see and what we think makes sense into like our perspective and what makes sense for us.
Right.
And like one specific example could be that we from the very beginning said, when we identified there is a gap in the orchestration world, that we don't have an orchestration system in place that could provide core COI, CUC, so chain of identity, chain of custody capabilities, that we made the decision that we are a pharma company. We want to stay a pharma company, and that if we need something, we would probably try to get it from the software market. We might need to help there to co-innovate something, but we want to consume a living product from a software market. We don't want to have a custom build that we build up in-house. That was one decision where we started to co-innovate, for example, with SAP and Accenture.
Right. It's funny. Okay, so you mentioned a couple of things that just struck me. Not following necessarily what everybody else does, and then you mentioned, of course, gene therapy. And I don't know if you saw the news. It just made me think of this. Yesterday, I saw an article that Pfizer has effectively exited the gene therapy space. It seems it's interesting, just kind of talking about the industry for a second. We're seeing a lot of that, especially on the gene therapy, not so much on the CAR T side, but on the gene therapy side, because they're so expensive, right? I think one of the therapies that Pfizer was dealing with was like $3.5 million a patient for hemophilia, right? And they couldn't get enough patient engagement. What do you think about that risk around gene therapy, and what do you see kind of moving forward for the industry?
Yeah, so I don't think I can really. There's no like opinion that I have, or there's nothing I can say specifically about like gene therapies or that specific case. I think overall we have to acknowledge that it's an innovation space. So, and we are like, especially with gene therapies, we are targeting like the typically small patient populations. So it could be in the rare disease indication area, for example. So often it's low patient volume, and so more or less every company needs to calculate the business case and see, does it make sense, does it fit into the strategy and the portfolio to really pursue a gene therapy or an individualized autologous or allogenic therapy. So that's why those decisions are very complex, and it's very difficult to comment on this from the outside or like in general. In general, however, I think what I see, and that's also like publicly available information, is that I think at the moment there's, at least what I see, it might not be representative for the full industry, but there seems to be a stronger trend towards therapies that at least to some extent have a make to stock element. So allogenic therapies, for example.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, the business case behind it is bigger in the end. It's not as complex and as expensive to have a one patient only batch produced, and that's why I think there's a trend overall in that direction. If you look at the announcements from Roche regarding Poseida, I mean, that's also one reason why we decided to more or less bring them in. Which was also publicly made available. So I think, that's kind of an overall observation, but it's very difficult, like I said, to really judge in individual like portfolio decisions.
Yeah. Well, it does seem that the gene therapies are quite a bit more expensive per patient than the let's say a CAR T therapy, right?
Yeah.
And that seems to also be an impact to. I think if they can get the cost down, it might change a little bit.
I want to go back a little bit and talk again regulatory, right? So obviously regulators are there.
How fun.
It is fun, but kind of in my area of expertise. But the regulatory challenges, right? So regulators are there. This is definitely also new to them, right? So the entire CGT space. What would be, in your opinion, the biggest challenges that companies face with regulators out there, and both across the entire world, right? So we have FDA here in the United States, but there's also EMEA in European side, right? And then also across the Asian market as well. Are regulatory bodies viewing CGT through a microscope? Are they more stringent in their requirements, or are they kind of going along and trying to look at it from a perspective? Yes, this is innovation in a market. This is a new way of producing medicine and helping patients.
Yeah. So I'm not really involved in like regulatory engagements. I have colleagues that are covering like regulatory requirements, but the actual regulatory like authority engagement is not part of my role. However, like overall, I think what I'm hearing and what I experienced is that I think overall there's like strong support to bring those therapies into the market. It makes sense that like always we take a look at how high like is the advantage over existing standard of care. So is there really a benefit of bringing this additional therapy into the market? That's something that they do for all therapies, so it makes sense to do it for cell and gene therapies as well. And it's also kind of clear that because this is new, we probably have to expect more questions and more, I don't want to say change management, but more exchange about what's going on. How are we mitigating patient risks? How are we making sure we cover GXP compliant, GXP requirements and so on. So I think there's just more exchange required to make sure we have the same understanding of what will happen, what is happening, to ensure that they give us a green light. So that's what I would be expecting. But like I said, I'm not involved there. And we always also have to keep in mind that the regulatory approval is one thing, but as Anthony already mentioned, I mean, we also have to think about the reimbursement part of it. So regulatory approval is one thing, but then it might take some while and might be almost as complicated as getting the regulatory approval to perhaps not as much, perhaps like closely complex as getting the regulatory approval to get the reimbursement up and running.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Yeah. What do you think? What are some of your biggest lessons learned while you've been leading the digital transformation group or team over there?
Lessons learned. Biggest lessons learned. Let me think about it for a second. I think overall,
don't bet on the Rams. No, sorry.
No bet on Rams. And biggest lessons learned.
Maybe is anything around like, partner. Well, I can tell you from my perspective, and maybe that'll jar. So one of the challenges that I see, and I guess it's a lesson learned, I'm not yet sure how to overcome it, is, as you said, right, it's an exploratory space. And certainly for the bigger companies, I find it, the legacy thinking is very difficult, right, to overcome that particular hurdle, because you could say, and I've even heard people say it, you come with an innovative idea on how to, let's say, organize something. And it's well, we've never done it that way, right? So we won't entertain it. Or vendor management. I mean, there's certain areas that I think are more challenging, when you're dealing with this kind of exploratory space and you're dealing with larger companies. I think the smaller guys suffer from just budgetary issues, right? They're trying to do it, and it's harder for them to get stuff in place because of the budgetary issues. But I mean, that's a little bit of my experience, at least in working in the space.
Yeah. So I think one thing that comes to mind is that if you take a look just at the methodology of how we are running those projects, we are trying to work as agile as possible, but there are some, just from a textbook, SAFe, for example, as a management framework, or Scrum. If you look at that and try to make it work in the pharma context, I think there are still challenges that there's no textbook solution for how to do Scrum and and all that in the pharma context. So that's not specific to a CGT, and like it applies to other projects as well. But because of the degree of innovation and uncertainty in the portfolio, definitely that is something that is impacting us more if there are gaps between those methodologies.
Right.
So, for example, we had to pivot right in the middle of our implementation from one modality to another modality. And if you think about that already, is a huge lift. But because we were able to think about modularity, configurability early on, we somehow made this happen, and we're able to pivot from one area to another. So that's why I think this agility is very important, but there's no like textbook that you can just take and then say that's how it's done. You have to figure this out by yourself, and that's something you shouldn't be underestimating.
Right.
Very early on, when you set up such a project. That's one thing. Then, as you said, more or less, you're not building solutions in isolation. There's always an environment. There's an architecture environment. There's a process environment. There is a people environment, and that's something you have to really be careful to make sure that it fits, because very likely the environment that you're working in, especially if you are working for a company that has already established business in non-CGT areas, then you really need to work hard to make this fit work between what you need for CGT and the other side. And that's simple things like the support model for the solution, to have more like higher priority, faster response for patient orders. That's one thing. The release cycles is another thing where you might need to have a fix, a short, like something in the short term in the productive environment, and you need to wait for the next minor or major release, which then holds you back. So there are those small things you have to think about to really make this work together. And overall, like one of the key is not a lessons learned, but it's an observation or confirmation that that I more or less saw over the past years, is that we are working in a, and I always say this, we are working in a new business environment with new business processes, with new manufacturing technologies, with new supply chain setups and new products, and in our specific situation also in a new like internal business unit. So all that is innovation more or less in all areas, and that's definitely something that shouldn't be underestimated. And that's why it's very important to build on like colleagues that have the right entrepreneur-like mindset.
Right.
They tackle this and move this forward, because if you are someone who is,
But that's not always easy to find, right?
no, that's
kind
not
of
always easy to find. Exactly. And also, honestly, like you are evolving over time. Like at the beginning, we were really only focused on getting the investment up and running. That was, I don't know, 2020. Then we started to build something. So you build a project structure. And then it's mainly about building the capabilities and also building the business capabilities that need to come with the IT solution in parallel. And now we are pivoting more into an operational space where you have operational workload that needs to be covered. And if you think about the kind of profile you need to be successful in those stages, it's likely a different profile.
right.
That you need, and all that needs to be growing and evolving as the portfolio evolves. So
Right.
those things are not to be underestimated. That's kind of the key.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's funny because you said a few things. You said major and minor releases. You talked about the dynamicism that's in the industry, because you do need to pivot quickly. So it made me think. We were talking to a couple of people just this past week, and they were asking us, because obviously we build software, and we did learn lessons, from our interactions with clients on our services side. And they asked us, how many releases do you do a year? And then we said, you know what? Because of CGT and the way it works, we actually don't follow that particular pattern. What we do is, if there's functionality or if there's fixes that need to come out, we'll put them out right away. So, and we had an example where somebody wanted this calendar in the software, and we did it in a sprint, and we made it small and we put it out. And what's funny also is that, and this is Armen's hammers us on this because he also handles a lot of our quality stuff. We are definitely working on an agile model, right? And we're in pharma, so that's fine up to a point. And you get everything tested and ready to go, but as soon as it hits that validation cycle, right, it actually flips into a different mode, because you've got to go through specific steps, and you have to be okay with that, right? You can run agile, and then when it gets to putting it through a validation cycle, you do have to follow very strict steps, because people rely on that validation package, right, that you're gonna supply. So the thing about SAFe or any of these methodologies is they're supposed to be adapted. They're not supposed to be dogmatic, right? You're supposed to be able to adapt them to the way that you have to work. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think you took it. Sorry, you took it right from my mind wirelessly. What I was about to say. It's a very thin line that you have to walk. Technically, it's a hybrid approach, right? So you get everything done in a fast fashion, just like you are a startup. And then at some point, you hit those regulatory requirements where you have to be compliant, and then you cannot go without them, right? So, but it's walking that fine line, how to merge those things together, and then still be able to produce as fast as possible.
Yeah.
with
It's
quality.
actually, it would obviously and compliance, right? You got to be compliant at the end of the day. This actually, I'm going to throw a buzzword out there, and the buzzword is AI, obviously, right? Is there any appetite in the CGT space that people in CGT space are looking for the AI capabilities to be able, not just on the product side, but also on the system side that are supporting that product, right, in operations? Are there industry thinkers are they looking at AI capabilities and what AI can do to help?
Or
that
as an
entire
industry
process?
thinker, are you thinking about that?
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's a good point and a valid point. Like AI, in the end, you said it. It's kind of a buzzword. It's like CGT because AI can be a lot of different things. So again, I think definitely there are areas where AI makes a lot of sense, and it's probably if we would be more precise, it's data science projects where you would, for example, set up a classifier looking at pictures and saying cancer, yes, no, and at the very early stage where a human probably wouldn't be able to detect something yet. So those are use cases that I cannot share specifics about use cases, but those
Sure,
are
of
use
course.
cases I can think make sense. And then also, like, that means that you need to have a lot of data available, and picture is a great source of data because every pixel is a data point or 3 data points or even more. So everything where you have massive data already that you can use there, it makes sense to just go in with a team that understands data science well and try to find a machine learning model or something, a classifier that helps you to do the work. So it's more exploratory areas. That's something where I'm not really involved, but I would be surprised if there is no work going on in Roche to look into something like this. On the other side, there's AI or sometimes even like machine learning projects where we can use something that is available as a tool already. So a typical example would be generative AI, where like ChatGPT is a typical example. There's a Roche version of ChatGPT that you can use to do work. There are things like robotic process automation that we are using in order to bridge interfaces or to automate certain steps. And that's something that is going on. We use it for training as well, to create training content based on language models that are there. So I think there are small use cases where it's actually helping to bridge the gray space that I mentioned at the beginning between pure paper-based and the full-blown enterprise software solution, to have smaller, like very targeted use cases where you use it in order to cope with the workload, to make it as far as possible to the point where you really have to invest. And on the other side, you would have then more data available to be clear that your product is actually a success and it makes sense to invest. So to make it to this point, those things can definitely help. And yeah, like I said, also we are working on those use cases in order to reduce operational workload. That's one thing. Yeah, like, and then pure data science projects where you have really data scientists going in. It's more something for, I don't know, more the technical side of things. One thing though to consider though is that if you think about it, how to use the technologies, there are 2 ways more or less. In my mind, there's one, digitization, where you more or less do the same that you're doing on paper in a system. And to be honest, that's the majority of the work that we're doing, to digitalize paper forms, for example. And then there's digital transformation, where actually you're transforming the way how you do business and how you run the value chain and so on. So at the moment, we are still in a very early stage where we are happy to get the digitization done. And we are exploring a few things left and right. But digital transformation, I think that's the ultimate goal, and that's something for the future as well, to see if there's something that really like changed the game.
It's changing the thinking, right?
Yeah.
It's changing how the people approach the entire process itself, the business process itself. Some of the things that I would think of from the AI capabilities, like task automations, right? So like automating specific tasks within the entire chain or the process and whatever. So very interesting. Thank you for your point there.
So just switching gears a little bit, how on earth did you get interested in and start playing defensive end in Germany, American football? How did that even start?
Well, that started very early on when I was, I don't know, 15 years old or so, because at that point in time, I just completed my diving certificate.
Uh-huh.
And then I figured just diving in a pool in Germany inside is not as fascinating as diving in Egypt.
Oh.
And then friends of mine told me, hey, we are playing football. You are a tall guy. You have a tall brother. Join us. And then it started more or less.
Wow.
That's awesome.
One thing
Is
led to
American
another.
football popular in Germany? Because I know soccer is, but
Soccer is for sure. Yeah, I mean, it is popular, but it's not as popular as soccer, for example.
yeah,
And so it's still like a niche sport. Recently, it got a bit more like mainstream media attention, but overall, I think it's still like a niche sport.
Yeah. Well, the NFL, I think, didn't they just they're constantly taking, in the early part of the season, they go to London or Mexico. I think they play one in Germany this last year or something.
Yeah, so that's going on for a while already. So yeah, they always have a few international games.
Yeah.
There in Germany, exactly, but also in Mexico and I think other countries where the NFL team then has to travel around the world, play in
Two of
neighboring
them.
city or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going on for a while. Also, there were different ways how they tried to attract international like talents into the sport. So in the past, there was a European League, NFL Europe. They established an international pathway program where they try to scout international player that end up more or less on a free roster spot in a like a practice squad
Right.
roster spot in an NFL team. Yeah, but I think
But you're
main
sorry you missed that opportunity, right?
huh?
Bet you're sorry you missed that opportunity, right?
No, I'm too stiff for that. Too stiff, too slow, too lazy.
NBA does a great job doing that. I think their scouting programs across the world has been very kind of successful, because if you look at a bunch of NBA players nowadays, a lot of them are international players that are coming, not American based. They're all coming from Europe.
Yeah, and basketball is a bit different because the flow of the game is more like soccer. There's like a basket, which could be the goal. There's like a flow, and it's not like plays. So overall, I think basketball is more popular. So you would see kids playing basketball on the street or in school. You would likely not see them play football, but basketball is more popular. So there's more like, not more mainstream media focus on it, but it's overall more popular.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, Christian, it's been a pleasure. A half hour went by really quick. We're actually over that. So I want to thank you again for joining us and for sharing your insights.
Welcome.
And I look forward to seeing you again soon. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, and
Bye.
thank you for all of your
Bye.
good insights.
Yeah.
Welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, Armen. Well, I like Christian. He's a really good guy to work with, and he was great on the podcast. He's got a lot of great insights, and I love that he was a defensive end for a while when he played.
Know. That was a great conversation. I really feel good about it. It's and a lot of good insights, specifically from a person who actually runs these type of orchestrations, which is great.
Yeah, at a very large organization that actually, it has its challenges, and I think you can learn stuff from that and apply it across the board. So
yeah, hopefully we can have him again.
Yeah, why not?
Perfect.
All right, man.
Talk to you later.
Will see you later. Yeah, have a good one. Ciao.
Subscribe for more insights from leading CGT experts.